All right, I'm here with another discussion video. I know I did a video similar to this at the end of 2019, where I went over 5 underrated games from the 2010s, and limited it to just games that came out here in the United States from the 2010s. I figured I'd limit it down a little bit more and just go over some Switch and PS4 games. I think all of these games but one is actually available on Switch as well. But I figured that just kind of get some recommendations out there. I know some people appreciate that, and give me a good way to talk about some cool games that I really, really like that I feel are just pretty greatly underrated. So, one of these games I'll jump into now. It's actually a game that was in my videos from 10 underrated games from the 2010s, 5 underrated games from the 2010s. But this game has recently been ported, and the port is quite good. So I'll talk about it quickly, but I won't spend too much time on it. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. I talked about that in that video, and if you want to see that video, you can hear me talk about it more. But I replayed through this one, I guess, about when it came out, around a year ago now, actually, from recording this video. And this game is really great. It originally started its life as a Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem game, and quickly became into kind of a Persona-like game, but instead of having personas, you have legacy Fire Emblem characters as your, character that you fight with, let's say. And it's not exactly what people would want going into something called Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem, but what came out of it is really, really great. It is just, I don't know, it's lighthearted. It's not, super serious. You don't need to really have your brain functioning properly to actually really care about the story of this game, because it's really not there. There's not much, but the characters are fun and likable. It has kind of like a pretty lighthearted aesthetic, and the combat, I think, is really what stands this game apart. It is just really cool how there's a lot of customization you can do to it, especially when you're leveling up your characters. You can continue to level them up and find new ways to start racking up like combos with the turn-based combat, and bringing characters in that aren't in the active party. It's really, really cool. I really like this game a lot. I feel like this game is just vastly underrated. It didn't do well on the Wii U, and I don't think the Switch version really moved the needle one way or another either. I don't think it did very well either, but it is definitely worth a pickup. Definitely worth a shot. Developed by Atlas, published by Nintendo. Definitely worth a go on the Switch or the Wii U. The Switch version adds some bonus content. I think like all the DLC content and some other additional chapters that I don't think came out. There's like a way to easily grind that you can just go in and grab some like items that level you up, so you can grind a little bit faster. Some quality of life stuff like that. But the changes between the two aren't very huge, but from what you get here, this is still a good title, and I feel like one that shouldn't be as overlooked as it is, especially now that it's on the Switch and not on the Wii U anymore. Next up is a series I think a lot of people at least heard of but never really played, and I talk about any chance I get to play these games. I get to talk about them. I will talk about them very, really well. At least these two in the series. Full disclosure, when it comes to this series, 2 and 3 are on the PSP. They are different from what these games are, and the third one didn't even come out in the United States. You don't need to play any of them to understand the story or anything. It's their own self-contained thing, which is really nice. And they're actually really similar in gameplay between the two. And since I have Valkyrie Chronicles Remastered. Originally the game was on PS3. I have the remastered on PS4, but there's also, you can get digitally the remastered on Switch, and Valkyrie Chronicles 4 is also available on the PS4. It's on the Xbox One. I don't know if Valkyrie Chronicles Remastered is, but these games are great. Has a really unique kind of like watercolor in like a book kind of map almost art style, but it's still 3D and everything, and it is a strategy game. I feel like Fire Emblem fans could really like this game. They're not 1-to-1, so Fire Emblem's more grid based, but these are more, open. You can walk and you're on the field yourself, free to kind of go where you want more. within, your stamina or whatever they call it. I forget. So you're on the field a little bit more. It's more involved, I think. And it's really, really cool. The stories are pretty interesting and the characters are pretty good. I really like these games a lot. I think they're fantastic. I only played a little bit of the remastered one. I played the original game on PS3, and then I went back to the remastered ones because the PS3 one didn't have trophies for some reason. But I didn't play too far in the remaster. But the remaster seems good from what I can tell. The Switch version of Valkyrie Chronicles 4 is pretty much at parity with the other systems from what I can tell as well. So, but either way you go, these games go on sale almost constantly. You can get these games for like really cheap on the Switch pretty frequently, and they're just great. They're just great games. I really like them, and I feel like the people who don't like the direction that Fire Emblem's going into, especially maybe they don't like the kind of the waifu kind of ness to all these games, could really, really enjoy these games. And while I say that they're not one-to-one, they're really something special. I don't know if Sega plans on doing anything with this series. I hope they don't just leave it to languish. I don't know how well Valkyrie Chronicles 4 did, but it's really great. So it's a shame that if it didn't do very well, because these games are just excellent. But yeah, I feel like more people should be talking about these games for how good they are. So here's one that comes with a massive caveat, and putting these on the list might be a little bit weird, but I know I might as well talk about them. There's something I really, really like, and I feel like could be big, but they're kind of getting their own way. So I'll just go into them. The games are Deadly Premonition and Deadly Premonition 2. So, my main caveat here, and you could even argue why I put these on the list, but it's my list. So with the original Deadly Premonition game here, this is a port of the Xbox 360 game. It came out in 2010, I believe, and I think it came out at $19.99 at launch. And it is a fascinating game, the original game. It is a game that has so much ambition. It's really fascinating. There's like this open world. All these characters have their own cycles. They have their own almost life, and it changes with the weather. It's really fascinating. It's a really interesting game. The story's really interesting. It's like a really interesting murder mystery. People kind of say it rips off Twin Peaks, which we won't touch on that. But it's really, really fascinating. I really like this game. But the thing is, the game has a lot of ambition, but it had pretty much a budget of nothing. So graphically, it's not the best. I think the voice acting is good. I really like the main character's voice acting especially, but some of the other voice acting a little bit off. But the thing with Deadly Premonition, the first one, is that the original version on Xbox 360 is the best way to play the game. So the game was then ported to PS3, which wasn't a very great port. It was then ported to PC, which is just a broken port. And it was then ported to Switch here, and this is kind of thought of as like the second best place to play it from what I can tell. And it is has some problems. This is the way I first played through it. I still really liked the game and didn't even really know that it had as many problems. But going back and watching some interesting reviews, this is a version with a lot of problems, and a lot of people know Deadly Premonition is kind of almost like a joke series where it's like, oh yeah, the story's great, but the game's buggy, it's glitchy, it runs poorly. And that's not really the case for the 360 version of Deadly Premonition, and it is playable backwards compatibility on Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and those versions are pretty good, I guess. From what I know, that's probably the best way to play it if you alongside the 360 version. But obviously not everyone has the Xbox system, so it is playable on the Switch. Some of the cutscenes are like really badly compressed, stuff like that. Some of the audio is a little bit compressed, but I still enjoyed my time with it a lot. So that's something to consider. But yeah, it's a game I find is just really, really fascinating because it is such a game which at its core is excellent. And I feel like if this game would have come out not on the 360 in 2010, but if it came out on like the PS2 in maybe 2002, we would probably think of it as one of like the great games of all time. I really feel like that. We would really think about how cool it is. But obviously, look at the contemporaries of 2010 and then look at this game. It's a little bit different, but I really just am fascinated with this game and its development. And Swery, the director of the game, who follows me on Twitter. He also follows like 77,000 other people, so not really that special, but it is funny. Yeah, and so moving then to Deadly Premonition 2, or as the cover may say, Dead 2E Premonition, A Blessing in Disguise. This is a sequel that came out this last year for the Switch. It is actually Nintendo Switch exclusive and doesn't seem to be going anywhere else, which is very weird. I'm not sure who made this deal. Someone, I gotta respect it, someone at Nintendo had to have been a Deadly Premonition fan and just wanted this to happen. I'm sorry, this is not focusing very well. The lighting is really weird. I'm not sure what's going on with that. But I can respect that. I can respect that someone there was just a Deadly Premonition fan and wanted the sequel. This is a mixed bag. Well, the first game I can really respect for being 2010, low budget, have a lot of ambition. This game is just kind of a mess. And I played it patched. I just finished this game recently. I played it patched. It was like unplayable when it came out. It was like slideshow level frame rate. And the frame rate's still bad. The story in this one's not as good. It's a mixed bag. It's worth playing, though. And I feel like this series is really cool. It's really unique, and it's really fascinating. And Swery's very fascinating as other games. The Missing, which I still yet to play. D4. Stuff like that. So definitely worth checking this series out, at least the first one. The second one, I would say, I mean, it's graphically hideous. It's really bad. Like, it looks like a hunting game that came out on like the 360 in 2005 that was developed in like Eastern Europe. Graphics aren't very great, but I really, really, really like this series. I think it's ambition and it's just overall weirdness. It has a really weird tone to it, especially the first one, and it seems kind of unintentional. It's just a fascinating game, and I've said fascinating like 10 million times, but I'm really enamored just how these games exist. They're so interesting, especially I guess the first one, but they're so interesting with what could have been done on this budget and what was created. And I really recommend at least trying to experience the first game. Hopefully on maybe the 360 version, but if not, the Switch version is playable and they patched out most of the big issues. But what games I wanted to talk about, even if I don't think the second game is nearly as good as the first one, still wanted to talk about those ones. Talking too much about Switch games, so I'll bring out a PS4 game. This game I feel like is maybe getting a bit more of a resurface, a resurgence, I should say. So when this game came out, like no one was playing it but me, and I saw like after Black Friday and over Christmas break and stuff, a lot more people I saw who I follow on Twitter were playing the game, which made me pretty happy because this game's excellent. This was developed by Vanillaware and published by Atlas, and it is like one half adventure game in a sense, like a 2D adventure game, and one half a like a RTS almost, but it's not exactly what you think of when you think of RTS. But this game is great. The story is like, out of control, goes crazy. It's very interesting throughout, aside from maybe a few of there's 13 characters you get to control. You get to witness their part of the story, and then you just kind of watch how it all comes together and how these characters are connected. And I really like that. I really like that way. A couple of the stories aren't as interesting as other ones, but overall, it's really, really cool game. I know this game, I think worldwide sold like 300,000 copies, so it is not exactly a huge seller. But it's a shame too, because it is a really, really spectacular game. If you watched my top 10 games of 2020, this was on the list, and I really, really liked it. And I would highly recommend playing this. I would really recommend, if you're a collector like myself, I'd recommend trying to crack out a copy of this game now. It's already getting hard to come by. I don't think Atlas did a very big print run. If you just want to play the game, if you want to get the physical copy, but there's also just, you can always get it digital. There's no really time limit on that as much as there is where I would say try to track down this game quickly. I don't think they're going to do a second print of this. And I think a couple like Best Buy maybe and Amazon don't have this game in stock anymore already. So I would act fast because just an end of the generation game like this could go up. But I just really like this game. I really think it's great. The art style is gorgeous. If you know Vanillaware, they also did like Odin's Sphere and Dragon's Crown and Muramasa. So they have that really distinctive art style. And they usually used to do beat 'em ups. So seeing them do like a science fiction narrative 2D adventure game is really, really cool. And I really liked this game a lot. and I'd highly recommend it. And the story is just crazy. Like I said, you're really in for a treat on that. I really like the characters. I really like the character design. Something that doesn't get brought up enough is how good some of these character designs are. I go on and on, but all you should know is awesome science fiction game, Japanese high school kids with mechs, and that's all you need to know. And it's awesome. So another one here. Last game I want to talk about today is AI the Somnium Files. So this is another adventure type game with really cool story, really cool way of presenting the story, really cool puzzles. This is from Ichikoshi, I believe his name is, or Uchikoshi, I think his name is, of Zero Escape series fame. I never really cared for those games, but this game blew me out of the water. I think this game's awesome. This one is also available on PS4, so keep that in mind. It's on Xbox One, I think. Maybe not. It's on Steam. I don't think it's on Xbox One, but this game's really great. And it's a really cool like detective story, really violent, solving like some murders. It's been a little bit of a while since I played it, but I really like this game. This is a game that I finished and I'd like to actually revisit at some point. And that's kind of rare for games like this, especially as close as it is from the release. Characters are really interesting. Writing's really interesting. One thing you don't see very often, I'm hesitant to call this a visual novel because it's really not. Visual novels are, strictly pretty much reading, where this game has a lot of action scenes and puzzle solving and stuff like that. But it's funny as well. One thing you don't see with visual novels is, if you want to call it that, I would prefer, since this is an adventure game, I'd call it an adventure game, but you don't see constant voice acting. You don't see, pretty much every line in this game is voice acted, which is not something you see. And the voice acting is good, which is great. It's really funny. It gets dark, but it's really cool. Just the places that this story goes and some of the things that it tackles with telling its narrative. It's a really awesome game. I am not saying too much about it just because I don't want to hit spoilers, but I'd highly recommend playing this one wherever you play it. I think all the versions are pretty much on scale between Steam, PS4, Switch are all pretty much the same. They each have their unique quirks that aren't don't make the game run as well, but I had no problems with the Switch one aside from maybe a little bit longer loading times, trying to load in some dialogue sometimes, but that was about it. But I really like this game. Another game that has, I think, really cool character design that doesn't get talked about enough. And yeah, I just really like its style. It's one of those games that even if it is, a violent murder mystery game, it's also kind of just relaxing and chill to play, which I really appreciate. And yeah, the story is crazy. It goes nuts. It's awesome. And it's a really satisfying game overall. So that's it then for 5 more random PS4 and Switch games that I felt like I wanted to talk about that I think are underrated. I do recommend these games pretty much to anyone. The biggest asterisk I would say would be Deadly Premonition. You kind of have to know what you're getting into with that one because it is a bit rough around the edges. It is a bit weird. It is not always the most fun to play, and I definitely recommend that first one. The second one, don't play it unless you've played the first one. It's not gonna make any sense. And the second one, I wouldn't play the second one unless you really love the first one. I'll say that as well. But other than that, I'd recommend all these games. Try to have a decent mix. I know 13 Sentinels is like a part adventure game, 2D adventure game, and then part RTS. Tokyo Mirage Sessions is a JRPG. Valkyrie Chronicles is like a strategy RPG series. And, AI is like a 3D puzzle solving murder mystery game. So I try to have some. And then Deadly Premonition is like an open world murder mystery game. So I tried to have a little bit of variance between the different games. But yeah, I hope maybe you got some good recommendations from this at the very least. I'd like to hear in the comments down below, I'd like to hear your recommendations for some games for the PS4, Switch, or just in general. I always like hearing someone, I really like finding games that, I find are underrated and trying to talk about them more. So if you have a game that you really think is underrated, it doesn't have to be on PS4 or Switch. Leave it down in the comments below, and maybe I'll have to check it out. Other than that, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're already subscribed, follow me on Twitter alongside Swery at Objo Gaming, and I will see you next time.